Thank you all for joining us today. I'm Michael Black, co-chair of the Higher Education and Learning Community with Stuart Minson from Georgia Tech. I'm from Georgia State, and we're here at University of Georgia, which is a great example of how HELC works. This is the Sustainable Development Research Series that we're hosting, and we meet monthly on Fridays. You can learn more about the higher education learning community online. We're part of a larger Greater Atlanta Regional Center of Expertise on Education for Sustainable Development that's acknowledged by the United Nations University and is a regional sustainability network that supports implementation of UN Sustainable Development Goals at the local level through education and training. The network brings together universities like the ones that we already listed, as well as others, with nonprofit community, government, and business partners. Our speaker today, Patricia Yager, or Tish, is a professor of marine science at the University of Georgia. Her interdisciplinary research combines oceanography, marine ecology, and biogeochemistry, and concentrates on the interactions between climate and marine ecosystems. Recent projects of hers investigate the effects of melting ice sheets on Arctic and Antarctic coastal productivity, but also carbon fluxes in the Amazon River plume. She recently served as co-chief scientist on board the research icebreaker Nathaniel B. Palmer to the Amundsen Sea in Antarctica. And she currently serves as the director of the Georgia Climate Project. Her talk today is the Georgia Climate Project, scaling up from individual voices to a statewide climate hub. Thank you, Dr. Yager.
Thank you very much. It's really great to be here. I feel really privileged to be here today, so thank you all for coming, and those of you in Zoom space, I'm delighted to reach out across the state. I didn't know a whole lot about the RCE, and so I'm here to learn more from the group, and I hope we'll be more active in the future working together. So since the RCE is sponsoring this, I just like to put these up, and I know everybody's seen them before, but just to remind us of why we're here. What are we working towards? And I understand this series particularly was focused on scaling up efforts to achieve the 2030 agenda for sustainable development. And I look at these, and a lot of them have climate sort of threaded through them. I know there's one on climate action, but really climate change is such a big problem. It threads itself through many of the other and impacts our ability to deal with some of the other sustainability issues here. So today I am going to talk about this idea of scaling up. How do you go from the professor that I was in 1998, shouting into the wind, feeling like I was talking to myself most of the time about climate change? How do you go from that to leading what is a really exciting statewide climate hub, which has been going now for quite a few years, but is really just getting started and starting to see the fruits of the work that has been put in by a large group of people. And so I'd like to share some of that with you today and mostly invite a continuing conversation about how we can continue to make this progress moving forward. 2030 is not very far away. So who am I? Thank you for the introduction. I'm an oceanographer. What the heck am I doing leading a Georgia climate project? But I have seen climate change happening since I was a young faculty member here in 1998, working in the Arctic, looking at how all of the various places in the Arctic are melting. I put this up because, again, in 1998, I felt like I was one of the only people talking about climate change. And my students were like, what are you talking about? Why should I worry? It's not even happening. How do you even know it's happening? How do you go from that to where I was in 2010? And that's a picture of me when I started working in the Antarctic down here in the Amundsen Sea, thinking that, okay, well, it was just that we weren't speaking very clearly. So in 2010, everybody was trying to learn how to talk science to the public because we thought if we could just be more clear about our science, they would get it. And of course, 10 years later, there I am off the coast of Georgia now. It is not about the science being clearer. It's about engaging communities and engaging the public in ways that help them understand why they should even care right? And then also a big piece of it is what can they do about it? I've been giving talks on climate change and melting ice caps for 30 years. And it was my mother actually who said, Tish, you got to give people some hope at the end, right? Because you can't just leave a crowd of people feeling depressed. You have to empower them. And so certainly for the last 5 years or so, I have been much more focused as part of the Georgia Climate Project on engaging with communities, telling them why they should care, helping them understand that climate change is a lot more than just polar bears and melting ice. It is in fact very important things that we all care about, whether it's the avocados you like to buy or the oranges you like to grow, or maybe it's mosquitoes, or what is your story is about the poison ivy. Poison ivy is on the increase, or the pollen, or whatever it is. I mean, in the last 5 or so years, I think it's gotten very clear that we need to meet people where they are and figure out what they care about and show them why they should care about climate change. So I'm delighted to be now in charge of this Georgia Climate Project as the director, but I did start out in 2010 with this initiative here on campus, Climate and Society, which has been fairly quiet lately. We've been pouring myself into the Climate and Society, or into the Georgia Climate Project the last 5 years or so, but this still exists, and it is a growing part of how are the faculty on campus here at UGA engaging with climate as well. So this is just, if you don't know what the climate is doing in Georgia, we are warming up. We had a fairly cool period mid-century last century, because of land use and aerosols and interesting things that caused us to not warm up as fast as some of the other places in the country. But we have caught on, cut down some trees and cleaned up the air. And so now we're on the same track as everybody else. And the interesting thing about this though, is that it's very patchy. If you look, this is a 2015 paper, showing how patchy individual counties can be in terms of the, is there a way to move this around so you can see, how do I get this to, you can see what's in the drag. Hide?
Yeah, hide.
Oops, wait, hide floating meeting controls. There we go. When I look at this, I see really patchy. Some places are getting a lot of extra heat. Some places aren't getting any extra heat at all. So if I go talk to this part of Georgia and I talk to them about climate change, they're going to be like, what are you talking about? In terms of temperature. So we stopped using the word global warming a long time ago. Some people still like to use it. The other important thing to think about is it's not just temperature, right? Water has really changed in this state, and it's not so much the mean as the extremes. People generally care more about the extremes than the averages. Pam Knox, as I noticed, is on the call. She could tell you this for sure. We've been getting a lot of flooding. A lot of rain comes down in a very short period of time. We just had one of these events not too long ago. But again, it's patchy. Some places are getting less rain and others are getting much, much more rain. So again, we can't just talk about Georgia. We have to talk about communities. And so climate change action, resilience has to be at a smaller scale than most of us are used to talking about. Of course, then we also have the extreme events like the hurricanes that have a big effect. We talk about climate change for a little while on the news, and then we forget, right? And especially those communities get left behind and they're still dealing with the mess, but we stop talking about it in the news. Yeah, lots of flooding examples there. Sea level rise is a slow and steady threat. Some places in Georgia, this is Fort Pulaski, are getting flooded. There's king tides. The highway out to Tybee is flooded more often than it ever was. So there's a lot of coastal vulnerability related to sea level and these sea level rise and the high tides. So lots of interesting patchy parts of the state. Georgia is not all one state. And so if you think about vulnerability indexes, this is again from Marshall's paper with Casey and Johnson Gaither, looking at who's vulnerable in the state. Some places are more vulnerable than others. We just have to think about Georgia as not a single community. So let me tell you about the Georgia Climate Project. We started up in 2016. I got the phone call from Daniel Rockberg to represent UGA in this building growing network of universities that are working on climate change. And the mission from the beginning has been, what does climate change mean for Georgia? And what can we do about it? That was the best part. It was the what can we do about it? And again, this was the brainchild of Dan Rockberg at Emory, who was hired at Emory around this time. And he's the one who started it up and got us organized. And then he moved up to DC a few years ago to work with Biden. So we've lost him, and a few of us have tried to keep the ball rolling. I do want to say the original vision was that we need some leadership. We have lots of individuals, right? Individuals all shouting into the wind. We need some leadership and we need to coordinate. And we need to be science-based and nonpartisan as best we possibly can, because we do live in a red state where the politics make talking about climate a little bit challenging. But if we stay focused on the nonpartisan solutions and we stay focused on the science and we think about risk, maximizing opportunity and minimizing risk, those are phrases that GCP has become known for. And the goals here, principles, and I'm sorry there's so much text on this. I just want to make sure I ground us in the original mission and goals. It's all about partnerships. We are academic institutions. It's very easy for us to stay in our little boxes, in our little towers. People call us ivory towers, right? But we can't do that. We have to be more engaged. And being at a land-grant institution like UGA, of course, we have extension and we have lots of Archway partners and things like that. We are encouraged to do that work, but that's not inherent to all the academic institutions. Anyway, tapping into positive energy, innovative thinking. Again, equity was in the original priorities, but I don't think it had the weight it does today. And this was, again, a drawing from Daniel. Academia, working with government, private sector, and NGOs. To be honest, I don't know how well we've done this yet. When we had our Chart the Path visioning session last year, many of our stakeholders said, you're still not engaging very well with government. And, well, you're really still not engaging that well with some of the NGOs. And, oh, wait, what about business? Why are you not engaging with business? So when I became the director a year and a half or so ago, I kept hearing this, we need to do this better. This was part of the original vision, but it's very hard work. And as you know, from the RCE perspective, I bet, it is hard work. So we still have a long way to go with this. But the approach, again, I love this triad because it's about the science first, but not just the science. We have to have the stronger conversations with people. How do we communicate? Not just the science better, but to listen and have the conversations with all the stakeholders. And then also, like my mom said, tell people what we can do about it. What are the solutions? We're all sitting around wringing our hands about the polar bears or whatever. We have to come up with solutions. And that has been the focus of the GCP from the beginning. And I think it's why we've done as well as we've done. And then, of course, these are all threaded in together. They're all connected. So this is, again, a drawing Daniel put together of the science, the stronger conversations and the solutions, but then a network that provides leadership for climate change. How do we get people to work together to provide this leadership and show the way? And so we have partners. We have academic partners. Emory, Georgia, and Georgia Tech were the original three legs of the triad, but we pulled in North Georgia, Georgia Southern, Spelman, Columbus State, Agnes Scott, College of Coastal Georgia, Life University, and Georgia State. And so we now have 11, I think. We're up to 11. And what that means is people have representatives from each university that come to a monthly call and we talk. Sort of sounds like what you guys do with RCE. And we try to make sure we hear what everybody's up to. We support what they're doing. There's some stipends that go out to the universities. We have a student scholarship, Georgia Climate Scholars Network, which is mostly a student network that used to meet monthly. It depends a lot on who's the student at the time. And so we come and go with that one a little bit. But often have the meeting there. But okay, so here we have this network. What are we going to do with it? So the very first thing we did, and most of you, some of you on this call were probably part of this discussion, was our first major activity was to query the state. What do you care about? What do you want to know about? What are your priorities? And there was a steering committee. We had a whole lot of questions came back. And maybe some of you on this call were in this room putting together what we eventually called the Georgia Climate Research Roadmap. So again, it was a community-based gathering of setting of priorities. What are the big important questions? We grouped them into these 10 categories and published a paper. Do what academics do, right? But if you look at the authorship on this paper, every time I go back and look at this, I'm like, oh yeah, Heather was on this one, and oh yeah, Mindy was on this one. You know, people that weren't necessarily academics that were contributed a lot to this paper. This was a pretty neat exercise. And so actually, I keep wanting to try to do this again. And I'll tell you more about the resilience roadmap coming up. I don't think we can fit it into one paper anymore. So that's the take home. But you can go on to that paper. Of course, it's a paper, it's open source. You can go read the paper, but not everybody loves to read papers. So we translated what was in the paper to website and web information. And that, thanks to some funding, I stick this in because it was about this point that funders got interested. Once you publish a paper, whew, okay, you got some cred. Funders will start sending you a little money, and the Anderson Foundation in particular was pivotal to supporting the launching of the climate project. We did have an advisory board created. I was on this before I became the director, but Kim Cobb, you know, and Marilyn Brown and Jill Gamble and Marshall and Fatima and Yanglu are still now the current advisory board. Mackenzie Beveridge, I should absolutely mention, came on board about 1.5 years ago as our project manager. She's pivotal to making this thing work. We have academic partner representatives at all the partner universities, and these are the folks that join us on the monthly call and tell us about all the cool stuff they're doing and how we can help each other. So a lot of this is helping each other. Columbus State wants to do some decarbonization. They get some help from Agnes Scott, et cetera. So it really is very exciting to go on these calls and hear what everybody's working on. So a lot of this information is now on the portal, the Georgia Climate Information Portal. Again, trying to make fairly accessible science-based information available to whoever wants it. There's some really great climate stories, anywhere from a minute long to several minutes long, documentary-y kind of what's happening in climate in Georgia, either what impacts, but also solutions and some of the science. So really exciting story work that I hope to continue. That's Mark Johnson and folks here at UGA involved with that. There was a big meeting. So one of the watershed moments of GCP was the 2019 conference that was at Emory. And this was the very first time I felt like, wow, there's a critical mass of people in this state that care about climate change. There were 400 people at this meeting at Emory. Probably you recognize some of them in this picture, but I really do remember my dad was really sick at the time. And so I wasn't as present as I wanted to be. But I remember going and just looking around going, wow, I am not the only voice in the room. So somehow between the 2000s and 2019, with a little help from the Climate Project, we got a critical mass. And I think this really was a watershed moment for everybody to suddenly go, hey, wait a minute. We can work together. There's people across the state that are interested in this. So about the same time, focusing on the solutions was the Drawdown Georgia spin up. And I like to say, and they allow me to use the word, that Georgia Climate Project incubated the Drawdown. We are not the same. We now get very much confused with Drawdown. We are not the same. We incubated them and they are now launched and totally independent of us, although we do spend a good amount of time supporting their work and talking about their work. And I'll share with you a little bit of a project that GCP is working on that is also drawdown related of drawdown higher ed. And we've got some folks here today that are involved in that project. But Drawdown launched itself and it got its own funding, primarily again from the Anderson Foundation, and is doing some great work, the top 20 solutions for decarbonizing the state, and I encourage you to go to their website. One of the really important things that Drawdown has done is engage with the private sector. So something GCP hasn't done so much yet, but Drawdown was able to do is engage with over 70 businesses in Georgia who've all agreed in this business compact to work towards net zero carbon emissions by 2050. And the likes of Delta and UPS and Coca-Cola, and I've been to a couple of their meetings, and it's really impressive to see what these folks are doing. They've gone from sort of admittedly a little bit of greenwashing, just trying to make sure they don't look too bad, to really doing the work to get this decarbonization down. And I've been really, really impressed with the work that they've been doing. But Drawdown is only one of the solutions. The other one that's floating around out there, so in climate speak, we have mitigation and we have adaptation, right? So the other half of the story, or the other part of this necessary solutions, is the part that GCP has only begun to do, which is think about resilience. And how do we prepare and respond to climate impacts that have already started happening? Again, in '98, I could think, well, we don't need to worry about adaptation yet. We just need to focus on the solutions. We just need to focus on decarbonization. But that's not true anymore. We have flooding, we have extreme heat, we have climate change happening, we have wildfire fires, we have all kinds of things. We have to be able to help communities deal with the impacts of climate. So in the work moving forward, you'll see a lot more of this resilience effort. During the pandemic, we were a little bit difficult to have a network during the pandemic. So we went into WebEx, just like everybody else, or webinars. And so there's some really great, if you haven't explored these, if you have a spare hour to watch an interesting webinar, there's some really great information in these webinars. And then those of you that were here, maybe you were attendee at one of the 500 attendees at the big Georgia Climate Conference we held here at UGA this past year in May, a year ago May, well, not quite a year ago. And that was, I think, the first real effort to engage with communities and bring communities forward and figure out what do they need from us. So instead of being a climate scientist that drops down into the community and says, blah, 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 climate change, climate change, climate change. We need to shut up and listen to the communities that say, hey, wait a minute, do I need to worry about flooding? We don't have a river in our county. We shouldn't need to worry about flooding, right? But, you know, and then you're like, well, no, wait a minute, here's why you need to think about flooding, or here's why you need to think about food security, or here's why you think you might need to think about building a place for people to live in case you have, you know, figuring out what a community has, what their resources are. So not a deficit mindset, but an actual, what are the things do you have going for you? And then what are your vulnerabilities? I think having those conversations is a big part of what we did at the climate conference. And I feel like we've really started that conversation statewide. You can watch some of these. There was also a lot of discussion of equity. We have a YouTube channel, thanks to Mackenzie. You can go on and watch, particularly this one is really interesting. It's the Sustainable Newton folks talking about how they're bringing climate solutions home to their county. So really, really interesting, very solutions oriented, but not necessarily decarbonization as much as how do we make our community stronger to deal with these issues. The other thing that's happening is there will be a special issue, special feature in an open source journal called Elementa on the Georgia Climate Resilience Roadmap. So anybody who was at the conference or even wasn't at the conference but is doing this work, this is an open call. There will be a special issue. So instead of the one paper with 40 authors, we're hoping to have 20 papers maybe talking about all these really different, interesting issues. So if you're interested in that, it's about to go live. And the window for publications or submitting papers will be open for probably 6 to 8 months starting now. So please reach out to me if you're interested. So where do we go from here? It's been a journey for me, going from someone who was sort of part of a network, helping out when I could 2 or 3 years ago, to now driving this boat. I like to drive boats, so I'm enjoying it. It's been challenging though, because I am not an expert in climate in Georgia. So I've really appreciated all of you who've taught me everything I know. But I still think we need leadership. We're still in a state that's not, we don't have a climate, we just started to have a climate action plan, which is very focused on decarbonization. We still don't have a resilience plan. We don't have a climate resilience plan for Georgia. And we have really interesting work going on in some of the regions there's some really great work going on in resilience in coastal communities, and also the Atlanta Regional Commission has started to do some really great work. So we have pockets of best practices that are spinning up. The Decatur plan is really exciting. There's some really great pockets of work going on. But there's a lot of Georgia that's still underserved, shall we say. And so one of the things I have decided is important to me and to the GCP, and I hope people will come along, is to think about, let's make sure everybody is in the conversation, not just the organized parts of the state. And so this is my kind of roadmap for myself. We want to really focus on this resilience roadmap, get the publications out, but also start to work on people like Jairo Garcia, who are and others who are putting downscaled climate projections forward. So you can go to Madison County and say, okay, your county is probably not going to have too much excess heat, but you're going to have a lot of flooding or whatever, or sea level, of course, rising. So how do we think about the vulnerabilities of individual counties at that scale, or communities at that scale? And that work is being done. There's just not enough of us doing it yet. We need to build capacity. The other one is listening to communities and working with communities and building that relational trust. Mackenzie and I have really been trying to reach out. There's some great organizations out there, particularly in rural Georgia, that Veronica Womack and others have helped us connect with, to try to listen to what do they care about? What do they need to know? How can we build that trust and get them what they need? We just submitted, thanks to Allison Bridges, a big proposal to NOAA that is a regional network. This even goes way outside of Georgia. Very exciting, connecting with the Black Farmers Network, Vulnerable Communities Initiative, Black Voters Matter, and other folks in Georgia, to try to sort of go listen in these communities and find out what they're worried about. Well, hopefully that will get funded. Keep your fingers crossed. But again, so GCP's partners are you can't really see them very well, but we have some statewide coverage, but not as good as I would like. So we really need to start building out our network beyond those 11 universities to a larger network. And so places like Fort Valley State and others are potentially new GCP partners that we want to engage with. And then also clicking in with these Justice 40 Accelerator organizations and some of the Black Voters Matter and other community organizations, doing a better job of working with the people. Stronger conversations. We're still interested in supporting Georgia Climate Stories. If you have a story to tell, make sure you let us know. We have some students in particular here at journalism who are interested in doing those stories. Business engagement, working with Drawdown to try to connect with the businesses. What do they need from us? There's this whole program called Rowan out now in Gwinnett County. They're trying to build sort of a triangle, or whatever you want to call it, of business and academics working together. I'm really excited about that work because, again, and I was part of IGEL this year, so I've learned a lot about what the business community is thinking. We just need to have those conversations more. NGOs, there's some great work going on with NGOs. Hopefully some of those folks are on this call. Again, these are all goals, but I think we need to have these conversations a little more than we've been able to have them in the past. One of the ways we're trying to do business engagement is to create our own drawdown. This is brand new, ink still wet. Justin, you haven't even seen this yet. We're partnering with Meta Impact. If you don't know about a Meta Impact, you might want to. It's a pretty interesting networking ecosystem. And we're going to try to connect all of the partner universities into this drawdown higher ed ecosystem where we can help each other with our decarbonization goals. And it's just getting off the ground. The idea will ultimately be that what we can do for ourselves, we can also teach students how to do, and they can go help others do it. So training the future sustainability workforce is part of this plan. And that leads us to the workforce readiness solutions. We are higher education. Our goal is to educate. We need to create students. We have, I mean, Tira knows this. We have a lot of students that want to know how to do this work. We need to help them learn to do both the sustainability skills that are needed, but also the resilience planning. How do we downscale this climate data in a way that's accessible to people? And ultimately, if I can find the money, I do think we still need a statewide climate resilience plan. I don't know exactly what all that does mean. I mean, it's a big, big job. And especially with the variety of impacts across the state, it's probably a big, big job. So, but ultimately, I think that's what GCP is going to be good at. So at that, I want to say thank you. I know I tried to keep that kind of short so we could have lots of questions from both the room and the Zoom. The main thing is we're going to focus continuing on what does a changing climate mean for Georgia? And what can we do about it? You know, how do we act? How can we organize and make us all stronger? And please, how can we partner with you? Because we are growing and we want to make a difference. So thank you for listening.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about sort of possible interactions with the state government. You kind of alluded to that maybe at the very beginning and very end. And you're working a lot with local county governments, is that right?
Yeah, so I think
Is it just
from my
enough sort of-
perspective, it's the municipal governments that are on the front lines right now. And they're the most interested and willing to have those conversations. So, yeah, so rather than like try to get into the governor's office, I'm much more inclined to work with the city managers and the city planners and because I also learned, so the other thought I had from the conference was the regional planning network. But what I learned is that those folks have to get their marching orders from the cities or from the municipal governments. They can't they can't go this way. They have the information has to come up. We want to do this. So that they can then engage with the planning, the 5-year planning for these counties. So it really is at the municipal level or the county level or the individual small scale government officials, the mayors who are on the front lines, and the monies that are now available are available to them, although most of them don't have grant writing people on their team. Some of them do, but not all of them. So if we can get them engaged and help them to write the grants to get the work done. A lot of this is, we can't just go in and listen and give them the information. They need support to implement the solutions, right? So, and that's where the federal dollars are gonna have to come in. Good question though.
Marilyn has a question.
Hello, Marilyn.
Hi. I just wanted to continue the conversation about working with the state, because as you know, Drawdown Georgia has been working and supporting the state's priority climate action plan, EA, first of a kind, in the state of Georgia. And we've engaged people from across the partner universities that you've seen on the screen. All of them have contributed data and ideas, and much of that is going to be seen in at least the appendices to the PCAP, Priority Climate Action Plan. They've identified 18 measures that the state is supporting that could be the topic of carbon pollution reduction grants that will be where proposals for those grants will be due April 1st, 1 month after the PCAP is due, which is March 1st. anyway, just a heads up to stay tuned. If you're working in that domain, you'll want to learn more. And you can get onto the State Department of Natural Resources, Environmental Protection Division website and find out what's going on. They're really good about keeping everyone informed. So it was very, very, it was a wonderful experience. It has been a wonderful experience to help the state in that regard. In addition, of course, as you say, Tish, we got to be working all the way up and down the chain of command in government to be effective.
Yeah, thanks for that comment. There is work at the state level for sure going on, starting to, mostly in the decarbonization space.
Sure. I was on a call this morning with the Climate Resilience Plan Group for Decatur. And as far as I think we've come and as great as the network that we've built, I feel like we're not where we need to be. And we're one of the leaders.
Right.
And that scares me.
Yeah.
I wondered how much communities have sort of at least made the connections in different places in the state so that they can have some of these deeper conversations to realize how deeply they're behind in planning things out. It seems like we're just now getting to the point of like talking to communities about what the threats might be.
Trying to see if there's a question in there. So
the question is, how far along are some other communities within Georgia? Or are we right at the beginning conversations with other places in terms of climate resilience?
yeah, so I think some communities are further than others. There's some lots of coastal discussions placed, for example, on Tybee and things like that, that have been going on for quite a few years. But yeah, we're all like still in our little silos trying to figure this all out by ourselves. And so I think so while the issues are regional or local, which is absolutely true, the solutions are not necessarily completely local. So it feels like we need to talk with each other more, and maybe the regional planners are the connection. Planning offices, there's 12 regional planning offices that can help pull it together. I think so. I'm hoping if we can tap into some of the folks that are working on these regional resilience or small scale resilience, get them to put a paper into this special issue and we can start to see what others are doing. But yeah, I think we're all still very much in our little boxes trying to figure this out, and you can share best practices much better through the networks that we create, for sure. That's not a great answer to your question. You look a little bit.
I also feel like, and this is part of our bias as universities and colleges, that we publish papers and we talk about the stuff and we have the climate conferences at universities.
Yeah. Okay.
But is that the best social network for reaching communities? And are there examples of other projects that have nothing to do with climate that have reached communities in big ways? And the biggest in the sustainability path that I can think of is recycling. Every K through 12 kid talks about recycling. They had a great educational component. But I don't know how that went out. And so I wondered if you or others who are here have an idea of like, we're not paid to be social networkers, we're researchers, but where is the best examples of where that's been done that we could take a page from?
So I bring to mind the extension. Ag Extension is a great network, and climate is on their radar, certainly. So, but whether we've connected with them in a way that is effective, I mean, Pam could probably give a whole nother talk on that. She works very, very hard to get the word out to that network, and to the farmers that need that information. But I also spoke to a farmer last year as part of my IGEL, and I was like, what could a climate scientist, how could we help you? And he's like, there's nothing you could tell me that would help me. I plan from year to year to year, and some years are good, some years are not. And they really are not in the same headspace that we are in terms of thinking down the road very far. So I'm just not sure, that's a really difficult, the ag community for sure needs support and needs our help, but it may just be doing the work that Pam is doing and talking more about what are the opportunities? How do you take advantage of the opportunities and giving them some help with the risks? I don't know. Good question. I think the Georgia Planners Association is interested in doing some of this work with us. Maybe we can get into the communities that way. That's much more county scale than the regional scale. I don't know. It's a good question. We connected, Mackenzie and I, with Black Voter Network, which is a nonpartisan, mostly get out the vote, but it's this incredibly amazing network of people across the state that talk to each other about mostly voting rights. But we gave a presentation to them, and someone from pastor from Augusta was like, can you come talk to us about what's happening in Augusta? Like, so maybe there's these little inroads. I don't think there's one solution. I think it's just connecting with people. We've talked about having a road show, the GCP road show, and get in a bus and go drive around the state, but I want to do that just yet. Maybe somebody wants to do that.
And Pam says farms are businesses, so it helps to show how climate adaptation can save money.
Yes, business engagement. That's absolutely where Drawdown has certainly made its impact. Yeah.
I moved here from Virginia, and Virginia had a model doing kind of what you're describing, where it was, I don't remember if they called them conferences or workshop days, but there were big events held in coastal Virginia that were research scientists sharing their latest developments on how climate was going to affect coastal communities, and those municipalities actively attending, initiating, adaptation responses, strategic adaptation responses based off that new science. What was unique in this like Chesapeake area of Virginia is that Extension had actually assigned a new group of about 6 or 8 extension agents that their focus was on climate resilience and climate communities. And so there are some models on, that was the governor came to that event. So, I mean, it was a very well supported, collaborative.
Yeah.
But what was nice about it is it was built on the climate science, the demand for that climate science from these municipalities. They were ready to adjust, and they wanted more and more information on how they needed to adjust.
Yeah. So science, stronger conversations, and solutions. We just keep keeping that mantra. And then Pam's point about saving money, it's not just solutions, it's actually saving money ultimately down the road. I mean, insurance companies are very interested in this stuff because of all the money. So, yeah.
It's not the solution. As you said, there's no magic bullet. There's going to be lots of different things that we need to do, but I think you should leverage your iGel now because you've got alumni like you across the state doing very, very different things.
Yeah. I can't believe it took me this long to join iGel. It took me 20 years to discover it. So, yeah. Do y'all know what iGel is?
No, I was gonna write
Institute for
Georgia.
Environmental Leadership. And it's originally started, 20 some years ago from the state leadership said, all you environmental people need to get together and talk because we have too much litigation, too much court stuff. We need to solve this before we all end up in court. So they started having these classes, about 30-ish people every year, going through this sort of retreat, 6 different retreats over the course of a year, learning about each other and learning about all the different lenses that we look through, when we think about the environment and trying to speak the same language and all get on the similar pages. Yeah, it was a really interesting experience. If you haven't done it, they have applications every year. You can.
The applications are in October. It's through Georgia State. It's based at Georgia State right now.
Yeah. And it was interesting being one of only 3 academics in a group of 30. Being an academic is not the only way of thinking about these problems. Contrary to what we probably all want to think. So, anyone else in Zoom has questions?
Has Georgia Climate Project collaborated, and maybe I should know this already, with Archway Partners?
So I started that about a year ago. I reached out to Archway, and they've invited me to present at their March conference, so I can get the word out that we would be interested. They've never done climate. They're doing resilience, very much doing resilience. This is Archway at UGA. But climate resilience wasn't really part of that yet. But the leadership over there was really interested in maybe pulling some of that in. And so, yeah, I'm hopefully cultivating that. I put their name and collaboration on a few grant proposals. Nothing's come through just yet, but yeah, that's the idea. Is I'll present to them and then they can come to us for the information their communities are interested in. Yeah, thanks for asking my question. Yeah, it feels like I've sent out lots of tendrils in the last 6 to 8 months, and I'm hoping some of them are going to sprout. Yes.
I'm curious about, you were talking about workforce readiness, training students to work in this space. Can you say a bit more about what's going on
So we
there?
had several sessions at the conference on curriculum and teaching and, teaching students this material. And what I've heard from people like Justin is that there's a big gap in what people need to hire, companies need to hire, and what our students know. And that's been publications written about that. Microsoft and others can send you those links, but that we're students who get out of college don't have the skills that they need to say do the decarbonization accounting, for example. So I know Tara's been working hard on that. We need to build capacity and engage with other campuses. So all of the partners in our partner network are all saying the same thing. They have lots of demand of students that want to learn this stuff and building this curriculum. So sharing curriculum across campuses has been a really important piece. Some of the learning communities that we're involved with. So sharing that information, but it also needs to be a little bit more than just higher ed too. So we've talked a little bit about train the trainers. So how can higher ed help encourage someone to go teach at a community college, for example, or go teach at a career academy at a high school to get this information? The teachers who are in the career academies and the technical colleges need help with this content. A lot of it's new. So we could also serve as a bridge. All of our students don't have to do all the work. We can help train the trainers. So that's another piece of the puzzle. Just for example, one of the proposals we're spinning up is to do drawdown higher ed and create a summer internship for a handful of students who can learn how to do this and then potentially work with some of the businesses across the state to help them with some of this decarbonization, working with the business compact. But there are businesses out there, some of the folks I met at IGEL already know how to do this work, and maybe we can engage them with some of the training of these new students who want to learn this stuff. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of folks thinking about it, and it's probably one of the most critical needs at the moment. Yeah.
I'm a student, and I guess right now I'm in a intro to sustainability class, and I think a lot of the students have been taking that class with me. They're my age and we're all in the same generation, and I feel like we're taking that class because we don't really know anything and we want to do something and we're not really sure where to start. And the only way that we've been really exposed is through social media, and it's not really like very educational. It's usually just like be scared for your life, and you have to do something, and we're just like, well, I'm a kid, I don't know what to do, so I think it's kind of, if we call it like, maybe there could be what you call a bridge to like high schools and like maybe elementary school too.
I absolutely agree with you. I think that's where the power, we've got a lot of climate anxiety right now, and that's not effective, right? We need to help people with that, mostly by helping them figure out what can we do, right? I'm on the school board in Athens, Clark County, and we've just started a sustainability committee to try to think about our school district, and that was led by kids. Kids asked for that. They're the ones who wrote the petition to get us to think about those things. So but you're right, making it social media, I guess, however we have to reach out. I'm not very good at that, so we could use a few folks in your age group to come work with us and help us do that better. Would that help? Come work with us.
social media has, of course, its ups and downs.
Yeah.
I don't know, I'm not really sure where I stand on like, oh, do I want to get my information from like Instagram, like if y'all had an Instagram, like if I like follow it and like keep
Yeah.
up, or if I'd rather hear from it like from like my actual school.
Yeah.
And like with like personal connections.
Well, I do wanna brag on Tira's Sustainable Certificate Program because the job placement for students that come out just with a certificate, so not a major or minor, but their ability to get much better jobs coming out of college in things that are super cool, compared to when I came out of college is astounding. So the job market is really good for people who are interested in sustainability. Yes, there are a whole set of skills that the job market's looking for, but I do think we're in a position now, here at UGA specifically, not at every higher education institution, but
Right.
here, to get a picture of what that looks like. So that, you can come out doing something. The society finally is expressing, we need this.
Yeah. And I think UJ's done amazing and we can share with all the partners around the state what we've done well and then hear from them about what their challenges have been. I think that's where the networking comes in is we know this is not just a Athens, Georgia, UGA thing. It's the whole state, so.
It would be nice to begin to have higher education begin to address all the different specialties within sustainability, because it's a broad field, right? And the needs are really broad. I think sometimes there's confusion about that. I know Tish was approached by our technical colleges recently saying, hey, we want to churn out solar technicians, but we don't have a place to do it. Well, we have an 8-acre solar array that's unique in the state and that it has 5 different configurations and it was built as a research center. But we're not, higher education folks are not talking about, what are all the needs? How can we meet these in diverse ways across the state? I mean, I shouldn't say we're not. We do talk about it, but not as much as we should. It's a new network. It's pretty.
Yeah, it's a little fresh, still wet behind the ears.
I'll add that if you're looking for more science-based information on TikTok and social media, the EcoTalk Collective, I think, does a really great job of short, sweet, informative, action-based posts and short
EcoTalk
videos.
Collective.
EcoTalk Collective.
It's good to know.
Mackenzie points out the Georgia Climate Project is on Instagram and Facebook.
Yes, we are. And LinkedIn now. Thanks, Mackenzie.
We did have one question about to what extent there are any big questions or conversations underway about marine heat waves. Is that something that's relevant for Georgia?
Haven't heard much about heat waves for Georgia. We have some, the oceanography of the Georgia Bight is pretty interesting. We have an expert in my department who's teaching a course on that every fall. So the coastal waters of Georgia are warming. They're also increasingly organic. And that's triggering microbial respiration, which is leading to coastal acidification. So between the warmer waters, the freshening from the floods, and all the organics that are triggering microbial respiration, we have a really bad coastal acidification problem that is way beyond what you usually think about when you think about ocean acidification. And that's related to the heat and how the heat drives the respiration rates. So we do have some issues on the Georgia coast related to climate change. They're not usually what you think of when you think of the big like Pacific blob or the big heat wave in Pacific. But there is definitely coastal warming, and coastal acidification is probably the biggest problem right now. Yeah. Answer their question, hopefully. We have had, there was some talks at the conference about fish, popular favorite fishing fish moving north, leaving Georgia waters because it's too warm. So yeah, there's definitely warming going on in the coastal areas. It's affecting some of the marshes, but mostly the fish are moving. The fish are migrating further north. So you have to go fish in South Carolina instead of Georgia. And some of the Florida fish are moving up, so that's interesting. So yeah, things are on the move. Okay, yes.
Are you able to tell us any businesses that you've been impressed with that actually are, you know, that made plans and you kind of think their plans are kind of good?
So I met some folks from Cox. Cox has a really strong sustainability program, Cox Enterprise. I guess my slides are gone. Delta has been working pretty hard, and not just greenwashing. I mean, there's 70 in the compact, so I definitely encourage you to go look and see. Some of them are not just Georgia companies, but they're based in Georgia. UPS, I mean, everybody's, Norfolk Southern has really been doing a lot with trying to build more trains that are electric and can move cargo way better than trucks. I mean, there's some amazing decarbonization going on through the business compact. So I definitely encourage you to check out that group, and it's all mostly on the website. You know, get yourself to one of the all hands meetings if you want. I can probably connect you with those. Yeah, really impressive. You know, and they first was a lot of crediting and carbon credits and like buying up forest and things, but they're really shifting to much more focusing on the real work, you know. I mean, it's gonna be hard for Delta to not use all that jet fuel, obviously, but so they're gonna still have to do some of that, but and I know the business compact is working on forestry, increasing forestry lands. You're involved in some of that. Where are the opportunities to plant trees? Having companies investing in that work at a scale that's smaller than the very large scale. So I know Davey is working on some of that. Yeah, and electrification is, they're trying to work together on joint solar, so they can share the cost and benefits from solar. So there's some really great work at that business compact. Yes.
I just am on the Drawdown Georgia group with Forest largely, and I just found out yesterday, the Nature Conservancy has an amazing website on county-based, state-based and county-based reforestation opportunities.
Potential, right?
Yes,
Potential, carbon potential of all these counties. Yeah,
Yes,
incredible
yeah.
work. Yeah,
It's amazing.
yeah. And the Georgia Conservancy, not the Nature Conservancy, the Georgia Conservancy has also done a lot of GIS work across the state at the county level to figure out where's the redevelopment or development happening and where's the deforestation happening versus, you know, like
Potential.
where are the developed and undeveloped lands?
Yeah.
So there's some really amazing GIS work going on around the state with that.
I'll say a quick positive word for UPS. I've had interactions with them like maybe 10 years ago or so. I was quite impressed by their efforts to not greenwash, but to legitimately address reducing carbon emissions, and they have forest lands, increasing carbon sequestration via trees, which I like.
And I can point you to some of the videos from the conference where we had the business engagement. They had sort of a roundtable where people came forward and talked about for like 10 minutes about their different businesses, what they're each doing. I'm happy to share that with you. Did you have a quick question?
Not too aware on the business sector, but I'm just wondering, like, what makes them want to be more sustainable? Because that's like usually like against like what cost efficiency. And I mean, it could be like, oh, consumers aren't gonna buy the products now. So now we need to adopt, you know.
Yeah.
I feel like that could be an explanation.
So I think bottom line is cost. If you read Ray Anderson's book about how much money he saved going circular loop with all of his manufacturing, there's a lot of motivation to save money doing this. But there's also now the new investment. There's help me out, I learned about it at IGEL and I've forgotten the initials. It's the investment firms are now environmentally sort of judging companies for their, thank you, what was that?
ESG.
ESG, thank you. ESG, there's now like ratings. How well are you doing some of this work? So, you know, they're chasing after that a little bit too, but really it is saving money and doing the right thing. There's some really good folks out there in these businesses that want to do the right thing. This has been great. Thank you.